The telegram came on the coldest day of October 1882, when the wind cut through the valley like a knife, and Katherine Parker knew even before she opened it that her life was about to change. Her fingers trembled as she broke the seal and unfolded the paper, the black ink stark against the cream background. Sarah stopped breathing yesterday, stop funeral Friday, stop 4 children need help, stop come quick, stop Samuel. Katherine sank onto her chair, the telegram falling to her lap. Her best friend from childhood, Sarah Young, was dead at 32. And her brother Samuel, the stoic rancher who'd always intimidated Katherine, was asking for help. She stared out the window of her modest Chicago apartment, watching snowflakes begin to fall. She had a stable position as a schoolteacher, a small but reliable income, and a quiet life. But Sarah's children motherless now, with only their uncle to care for them, she made her decision before the snow had covered the ground. 1 week. She could spare 1 week to help Samuel get the children settled, find someone permanent to care for them. Just 7 days in Jordan Valley, Oregon, the frontier town where Sarah had followed her husband before he, too, had passed 2 years earlier. Katherine had never imagined returning to the West, not after leaving it behind 8 years ago with a broken heart and wounded pride. Certainly not to face Samuel Young again, the man whose rejection had sent her fleeing eastward in the first place. As the train carried her across the vast American landscape, Katherine tried to prepare herself. She was 28 now, not the naive 20-year-old who had foolishly confessed her feelings to her best friend's older brother. Samuel had been kind but firm when he'd explained he had no interest in settling down, especially not with his sister's girlhood friend. She'd been mortified, and the next morning, she'd boarded a train east without saying goodbye to anyone but Sarah. The landscape grew wilder as they traveled west, civilization giving way to rugged terrain. Katherine watched from the window as forests thickened, mountains rose in the distance, and finally, the vast grasslands that surrounded Jordan Valley came into view. The frontier town had grown since she'd left, but not by much. When the train pulled into the station 5 days after she'd received the telegram, Katherine gathered her courage along with her luggage. The platform was crowded with cowboys, farmers, and travelers, but she spotted Samuel immediately. At 36, he stood taller than most men around him, his broad shoulders impossible to miss. The years had added silver threads to his dark hair and lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. But it was unmistakably him, and Katherine's heart betrayed her with an unwelcome lurch. He hadn't seen her yet. His eyes scanned the disembarking passengers, a small girl of about 4 clutching his hand. Katherine recognized Sarah's youngest, Emma, though she'd only seen her in photographs. She took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Samuel," she called softly. He turned, and for a moment there was nothing but raw grief in his eyes. Then recognition followed by relief. "Katherine, thank God you came." His voice was deeper than she remembered, roughened by the years. "I'm so sorry about Sarah," she said, fighting back tears. "I came as soon as I could." Samuel nodded, words seemingly caught in his throat. Little Emma peered up at Katherine with curious blue eyes, Sarah's eyes. "Is this Emma?" Katherine knelt down. "Hello, sweetheart. I'm your Aunt Katherine. Your mama was my very best friend." The girl regarded her solemnly before speaking. "Mama's with the angels now. Uncle Sam said so." Katherine's eyes met Samuel's over the child's head. The pain she saw there made her reach out instinctively, touching his arm briefly before withdrawing her hand. "The others are at home with Mrs. Wilson from next door," Samuel explained, taking Katherine's trunk. "She can't stay much longer, though. Her daughter's having a baby in Boise City." They walked to a wagon parked nearby, Emma skipping ahead. "I appreciate you coming," Samuel said quietly. "I know it's a long journey." "They're Sarah's children," Katherine replied simply. "I could never refuse." The ride to the young ranch was filled with awkward silences and Emma's occasional comments about passing sights. Katherine learned that Samuel had taken in his sister and her 4 children after Sarah's husband Thomas had died from pneumonia 2 winters ago. Sarah had managed well enough, helping with the ranch books and caring for the children, until she'd suddenly collapsed 3 days ago. "The doctor said her heart just stopped," Samuel explained, his voice tight. "Nothing anybody could have done." The young ranch sat nestled against rolling hills, a large main house and several outbuildings spread across the property. Katherine remembered visiting once, years ago when Samuel had first purchased it. It had been much smaller then, just a cabin and barn. Now it was a proper cattle ranch, with Cowboy's quarters and corrals visible in the distance. 3 children were waiting on the porch: William, 10, James, 8, and Charlotte, 6. They stood in a solemn line as Samuel helped Katherine down from the wagon. Their faces were pinched with grief, but they greeted her politely as Samuel introduced her. "Miss Parker was your mama's closest friend," he explained. "She's come all the way from Chicago to help us for a while." "A week," Katherine clarified gently, not wanting to give false expectations. "I'll need to return to my teaching position after that, but I'm here to help you all get settled." A shadow crossed Samuel's face, but he nodded. Even a week is more than generous. Mrs. Wilson, a gray-haired woman with kind eyes, emerged from the house wiping her hands on her apron. "Thank the Lord you've arrived," she said to Katherine. "These little ones need a woman's touch, especially now." She lowered her voice. "And that man hasn't slept more than 2 hours at a stretch since Sarah passed." Katherine glanced at Samuel, noting the dark circles under his eyes. He was speaking quietly to William, his hand resting on the boy's shoulder. The gesture was gentle, at odds with the rugged cowboy image he presented. The interior of the house was clean but chaotic, evidence of a household in mourning with 4 children, and a man unused to domestic management. Katherine's teacher's instincts immediately recognized the need for routine and order. "I'll show you to your room," Samuel said, carrying her trunk up the stairs. "It's Sarah's old room, I hope that's not." He trailed off. "It's fine," Katherine assured him, though her heart ached at the thought of sleeping in her friend's bed. The room was simple but comfortable, with a window overlooking the valley. Sarah's presence lingered in the handmade quilt on the bed and the pressed flowers framed on the wall. "I'll let you get settled," Samuel said, placing her trunk at the foot of the bed. "Supper's at 6 if that suits you." "Samuel," Katherine called as he reached the door. He turned, his hand on the door frame. "I truly am sorry. She was the best person I knew." Something in his expression softened. "Thank you for coming, Katherine. I didn't know who else to ask." After he left, Katherine sat on the edge of the bed and finally allowed herself to weep for her friend. That first evening was a somber affair. The children were quiet, answering Katherine's gentle questions with one-word responses. Samuel attempted to maintain conversation, but exhaustion was evident in every line of his body. After the meal, Katherine helped the children prepare for bed, reading a story to the younger ones while Samuel spoke privately with William, who seemed to be carrying the weight of being the eldest with a seriousness beyond his years. When the house finally quieted, Katherine found Samuel sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a pile of papers. "Ranch accounts," he explained when she entered. "Sarah always handled them." Katherine hesitated, then sat across from him. "I was a bookkeeper before I became a teacher. I could look them over for you tomorrow." Samuel rubbed a hand across his face. "You don't have to do that. I want to help," she insisted. "That's why I'm here." He studied her for a long moment. "You've grown up, Katherine. 8 years will do that." She kept her tone light, but memories of her humiliating confession hung between them. "I never properly thanked you for your letters to Sarah," he said. "They meant the world to her, especially after Thomas died." "I wish I'd visited," Katherine admitted. "But teaching doesn't allow much time for travel." "You're here now," Samuel replied simply. "That's what matters." The following day established a pattern that would carry them through the week. Katherine rose early, preparing breakfast before the children awoke. Samuel would already be outside, tending to ranch chores, coming in only when the food was ready. The children, initially reserved, gradually warmed to Katherine as she involved them in household tasks appropriate to their ages. In the afternoons, while Emma napped and the older children did their lessons, Katherine couldn't help but assign educational activities. She worked on Sarah's household books, creating systems Samuel could maintain after she left. Sometimes he would sit with her, asking questions about entries or explaining ranch operations. These quiet moments became surprisingly comfortable, their shared grief for Sarah creating a bridge over their awkward past. The funeral was held on Friday, 3 days after Katherine's arrival. The entire community of Jordan Valley turned out, filling the small church and spilling onto the grounds. Katherine sat with the children in the front pew, Samuel beside them, stoic and silent. When William began to cry, Samuel placed an arm around the boy's shoulders. When Charlotte and James followed their brother's lead, Katherine gathered them close. Only little Emma seemed confused by the proceedings, playing with the ribbons on her black dress, until she fell asleep in Katherine's lap. At the gravesite, Katherine stood slightly apart, allowing the family their moment of final farewell. She watched Samuel place a wild rose on Sarah's casket before it was lowered into the ground, his shoulders rigid with the effort of maintaining composure. The children clung to each other, suddenly seeming much younger than their years. That night, after the children were finally asleep, exhausted from grief, Katherine found Samuel on the porch, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring out at the star-filled sky. "They're finally resting," she said softly, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the October chill. "You're good with them," he observed, his voice rough. "Better than I expected." "I teach children their age," she reminded him. "Except for Emma, of course." "Emma's taken to you especially." Samuel offered her his glass, but she declined with a small shake of her head. "She hasn't let anyone but me hold her since Sarah died, until you came." Katherine leaned against the porch railing. "Children are resilient, but they need stability now." "Have you thought about who will care for them once I leave?" Samuel was silent for so long that Katherine wondered if he'd heard her. Finally, he drained his glass and set it aside. "I've been thinking about that since Sarah died," he admitted. "There's no one in town suitable who's willing to live out here on the ranch. I could send them to a school back east, but the thought of separating them—" He shook his head. "Sarah would never forgive me." "What about hiring a governess?" Katherine suggested. "Someone who could live here, teach the children, manage the household." "In Jordan Valley, Oregon," Samuel gave a humorless laugh. "We're not exactly drowning in educated women looking for employment on a cattle ranch 20 miles from the nearest town." Katherine couldn't argue with that. Jordan Valley, despite its growth, was still a frontier settlement, primarily populated by ranchers, farmers, and the businesses that supported them. Eligible women were quickly married off. Those with education typically became school teachers in town or moved to larger settlements. "There has to be a solution," she said, more to herself than to him. Samuel turned to look at her directly. "Sarah always spoke highly of your teaching, said you had a gift for it." Katherine felt a blush creep up her neck, grateful for the darkness. "I enjoy it." "The children in Chicago need good teachers." So do children in Jordan Valley, he said quietly. So do Sarah's children. The implication hung in the air between them. Katherine gripped the porch railing tighter. Samuel, I have a position, an apartment, a life in Chicago. I know. He straightened, suddenly formal. Forgive me, it's been a trying day. Of course, she murmured, though her heart was racing with unexpected possibilities and old emotions she'd thought long buried. The next morning, Katherine awoke to find a letter from her school principal that had followed her west. The school board, concerned about the extended absence she'd requested, had hired a permanent replacement. Her position would not be waiting when she returned. She sat on her bed, the letter crumpled in her hand, torn between panic and a strange sense of relief. Without a job to return to, her future in Chicago seemed suddenly insubstantial. When had her life there become so lonely? Her apartment was just a place to sleep between school days. She had acquaintances but few close friends after Sarah had moved west. Nothing truly anchored her to the city, except habit and the memory of heartbreak she'd fled years ago. Samuel found her still sitting there, the letter now smoothed and folded on her lap. Katherine. The children are asking for you. He paused, noticing her expression. Is everything all right? She handed him the letter wordlessly. He read it quickly, his brow furrowing. They can't do this, he said, indignant on her behalf. You requested leave for a family emergency. Sarah wasn't actually family, Katherine pointed out, and good teachers are in demand in Chicago. Samuel handed the letter back, studying her face. What will you do? Katherine looked up at him, suddenly aware that her decision had already been made somewhere in her heart. The children need consistency right now. I could stay a bit longer, help you find a suitable arrangement. Relief flooded his features. You do that. Sarah would have done the same for me, she said simply. That evening, as they sat by the fire after the children were in bed, Katherine broached the subject that had been weighing on her mind. I think I should extend my stay, she began carefully. At least until Christmas. That would give us time to make proper arrangements for the children, and they wouldn't face another disruption so soon after. She didn't need to finish the sentence. Samuel set aside the ranch ledger he'd been reviewing. Are you certain? What about your life in Chicago? Katherine gave a small, rueful smile. It seems my life in Chicago has made other arrangements, and the truth is, being here, with Sarah's children, it feels right. They need someone who knew their mother, who can keep her memory alive for them. And what about after Christmas? Samuel asked, his voice carefully neutral. I don't know, she admitted, but we have time to figure that out. The days stretched into weeks as October gave way to November. Katherine fell into a rhythm with the household, establishing routines that gave the children structure and security. She began teaching them formally each morning, using books Samuel ordered from Portland. In the afternoons, she involved them in household tasks or supervised their play while she managed the domestic affairs of the ranch. Samuel, initially awkward around her, gradually relaxed as they developed a working partnership. He consulted her about decisions regarding the children and came to rely on her management of the household. Katherine found herself looking forward to their evening conversations after the children were asleep, when they would discuss the day's events over coffee or, occasionally, a glass of wine. They rarely spoke of the past or of Katherine's youthful declaration that had sent her fleeing east. It seemed an unspoken agreement between them to focus on the present, on the needs of the children who depended on them both. Yet sometimes Katherine would catch Samuel watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher, something between wonder and wariness. The ranch itself demanded constant attention. November brought early snow to the valley, and the cattle needed extra care. Katherine learned to manage alone with the children for days at a time when Samuel and his ranch hands had to ride out to check on distant herds or repair fences damaged by winter storms. During one such absence, a blizzard descended without warning. Katherine kept the children occupied with indoor games and stories, but as night fell and the storm intensified, she began to worry about Samuel, who had ridden out that morning to check on a pregnant mare in the north pasture. "Will Uncle Sam be all right?" William asked as Katherine tucked him into bed. "Your uncle knows this land better than anyone," she assured him, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "He'll either stay in the line shack until the storm passes or make it back safely." But as the hours passed and the wind howled around the house, Katherine's anxiety grew. She stoked the fire and kept watch by the window, straining to see through the swirling snow. Just past midnight, when she had nearly convinced herself to try to sleep, she heard the sound of the barn door. Grabbing a lantern, she threw a shawl around her shoulders and rushed outside. The cold took her breath away as she struggled through knee-deep snow toward the barn. Inside, she found Samuel unsaddling his horse, his movements stiff with cold. "Samuel Young, you scared me half to death." The words burst from her before she could stop them. He turned, surprise evident even through the frost that clung to his beard. "Katherine, you shouldn't be out in this weather." "Neither should you." She set the lantern on a hook and moved closer. "Your hands are like ice." "Why didn't you stay at the line shack?" "Thought I could make it back before the worst hit." He stamped his feet, trying to restore circulation. "Didn't want to leave you and the children alone any longer than necessary." The simple statement warmed Katherine more than the lantern's glow. "Well, you're home now. Let's get you inside before you freeze solid." In the kitchen, she insisted on making him hot coffee laced with whiskey while he changed out of his wet clothes. When he returned, she had soup warming on the stove as well. "You didn't have to wait up," he said, accepting the steaming mug gratefully. "As if I could sleep with that storm raging and you out in it." Katherine ladled soup into a bowl. The children were worried too. William tried to stay awake but finally succumbed around 9. Samuel's expression softened at the mention of the children. "They've grown attached to you." "And I to them," she admitted. "They're remarkable children. Sarah would be so proud of how they're coping." They fell into comfortable silence as Samuel ate, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the howling of the wind outside. Katherine found herself studying his profile, the strong line of his jaw now visible again after he'd shaved off the frost-covered beard, the way his dark hair curled slightly at his collar. He was still the most handsome man she'd ever known, but there was something more to her attraction now: respect for his dedication to his sister's children, admiration for his quiet strength. "What is it?" he asked, catching her gaze. Katherine flushed. "Just thinking that you should teach William to shave soon. He's watching everything you do, trying to be the man of the family." Samuel set down his spoon with a sigh. "He shouldn't have to grow up so fast. None of them should have lost their mother." "No," Katherine agreed softly. "But they have you, and now they have me for as long as I'm needed." Samuel looked at her then, really looked at her, as if seeing her clearly for the first time since she'd arrived. "Katherine, about what happened years ago, please," she interrupted. "That was a lifetime ago." "We don't need to speak of it." "I think we do." His voice was gentle but firm. "I handled it badly, you caught me off guard, and I was—" He searched for the right word. "I was afraid." "Afraid?" Katherine couldn't hide her surprise. "Of what?" "Of feelings. Of responsibility. Of becoming my father." The admission seemed to cost him something. "He abandoned my mother when Sarah was just a baby. I swore I'd never risk doing that to someone, so I convinced myself it was better to stay unattached." "And now?" Katherine asked, barely breathing. Now I have 4 children depending on me, he said with a sad smile. Life has a way of giving you exactly what you try to avoid. You're nothing like your father, Katherine said firmly. You stepped up when Sarah needed you, and now when her children need you. That takes courage. Samuel reached across the table, his hand covering hers. You're different than I remember, stronger. 8 years of standing alone will do that, she replied, but without bitterness. His hand remained on hers, warm and calloused. Not alone anymore, Katherine. Not if you don't want to be. The words hung between them, full of possibility. But before Katherine could respond, a small voice called from the doorway. Uncle Sam, you're back. They turned to find Charlotte standing there in her nightgown, her hair tousled from sleep. Samuel withdrew his hand as the little girl ran to him, throwing her arms around his neck. I told Emma you would come home, she said proudly. Miss Katherine said so too. Miss Katherine was right, Samuel assured her, lifting the child onto his lap. I'll always come back to you. Over Charlotte's head, his eyes met Katherine's, and she knew he was making that promise to her as well. As November turned to December, the routine of ranch life continued, but something had shifted between Katherine and Samuel. There were lingering glances across the dinner table, conversations that stretched late into the night, and a new awareness that crackled between them like electricity. They were careful around the children, maintaining a proper distance, but Katherine found herself increasingly drawn to Samuel's steady presence and quiet strength. Christmas preparations provided welcome distraction for everyone. Katherine taught the children to make paper decorations, strung popcorn and cranberries for the tree Samuel brought down from the hills, and organized the baking of traditional cookies from recipes Sarah had kept. The house filled with the scents of pine and cinnamon, and for the first time since Katherine had arrived, the children's laughter rang freely through the rooms. One evening, a week before Christmas, Katherine was hanging the children's stockings by the fireplace when Samuel entered from the cold, snow dusting his shoulders. The hands are settled in the bunkhouse, he reported, removing his coat. Looks like another storm coming tonight. We're well prepared, Katherine assured him, gesturing to the stockpile of firewood and the pantry she'd stocked systematically over the past weeks. Samuel watched her finish with the stockings, a thoughtful expression on his face. You've transformed this place, he said. I hardly recognize it or the children. William's talking about college now. Did you put that idea in his head? He put it there himself, Katherine corrected. I just told him it was possible. She smoothed a wrinkle from Emma's tiny stocking. They're exceptional children, Samuel. They deserve every opportunity. Sarah would be grateful. He stepped closer, helping her adjust the last stocking. I'm grateful. Their hands brushed, and Katherine felt that now familiar spark jump between them. She looked up to find him watching her, his eyes reflecting the firelight. Katherine, he began, his voice low. I've been meaning to ask. The sound of running feet interrupted him as James burst into the room, excited about a drawing he'd completed for Katherine. The moment passed, but the question in Samuel's eyes remained. Christmas Eve brought clear skies and frigid temperatures. After a special dinner and the reading of the Christmas story, the children hung their stockings with solemn ceremony before being tucked into bed. Katherine promised them that Christmas morning would come faster if they slept well, though Emma required 3 bedtime stories before her eyes finally closed. When Katherine returned downstairs, she found Samuel placing gifts under the small tree wooden toys he'd carved himself for the children, books ordered specially from Portland, and warm mittens Katherine had knitted in secret moments. I have something for you as well, he said, reaching into his pocket, though perhaps it's presumptuous. He handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. Katherine unwrapped it carefully to reveal a delicate silver locket. "Samuel, it's beautiful," she breathed, opening the locket to find a tiny portrait of Sarah on one side. "The other side is empty," he explained. "I thought perhaps a picture of the children, or—" He hesitated. "Whatever you choose." Katherine closed her hand around the precious gift. "Thank you, I'll treasure it always. Will you?" There was a weight to his question that suggested he was asking about more than the locket. Katherine met his gaze steadily. "Yes." Samuel took a step closer. "Christmas is almost here and we haven't discussed what happens after." His voice was carefully controlled. "You said you'd stay until Christmas." "I did," Katherine acknowledged. "And now—" His eyes searched hers. "What are your plans, Katherine?" She took a deep breath. "I've been offered the teaching position at the Jordan Valley School. Mrs. Donovan is retiring after the new year." Surprise and something like hope flashed across his face. "You'd stay in Jordan Valley. When did this happen?" "The school board approached me last week," Katherine explained. "Apparently, the children have been singing my praises in town. The position includes a small house behind the school." Samuel was silent for a long moment. "That's wonderful news," he finally said, though his tone belied his words. "You'd make an excellent teacher for the town." "Yes, I think I would," Katherine agreed. "But I've been wondering if it's the right decision." "Why wouldn't it be?" Samuel's brow furrowed. "It's a respected position and you clearly love teaching." Katherine gathered her courage. 8 years ago, she'd been a girl confessing an infatuation. Now she was a woman who knew her own heart and mind, because the school is in town and the children, Sarah's children, are here. She met his gaze directly. "And you're here." Understanding dawned in Samuel's eyes. He closed the distance between them, taking her hands in his. "Are you saying what I think you're saying, Katherine Parker?" "I'm saying that I came to help for a week, but I've found a home here." Her voice was steady despite her racing heart. "I'm saying that I care deeply for those children upstairs. And I'm saying that my feelings for you never truly went away. They just grew into something deeper, something real." Samuel's hands tightened on hers. "I was a fool 8 years ago, too afraid to recognize what was standing right in front of me." His voice roughened with emotion. "When Sarah died, I didn't know how I'd manage. Then you arrived and suddenly there was light again. The children smiled again. You brought life back into this home." "Sarah brought me here," Katherine said softly. "I think perhaps she knew." "Knew what?" "That we would need each other." She reached up to touch his face, her fingers gentle against his cheek. "That we would fit together, like pieces of a puzzle finally finding their place." Samuel covered her hand with his own, turning to press a kiss to her palm. "Katherine Parker, I am completely in love with you. I think I have been for longer than I knew. Will you stay, not just until Christmas, but forever? Will you help me raise these children, build this ranch, create a family?" Tears blurred Katherine's vision as joy bubbled up inside her. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to all of it." His kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as if he couldn't quite believe she was real. Then, as Katherine responded, it deepened into something powerful and certain. When they finally parted, they remained in each other's arms, foreheads touching. "The children will be overjoyed," Samuel murmured. "They've been dropping hints for weeks. Even Emma asked if you were going to be her new mama." Katherine laughed softly. "What did you tell her?" "That I was working on it." His smile was tender as he brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I never expected this when I sent that telegram. I just needed help for a week." "And I came to help for a week," Katherine replied, her heart full. "But I'm staying forever." Christmas morning dawned bright and clear, the fresh snow glittering in the sunlight. The children woke early, their excited voices filling the house as they discovered their stockings and presents. Katherine watched from the doorway as Samuel helped Emma unwrap a doll, the little girl's face alight with wonder. William approached Catherine, looking unusually serious for a boy on Christmas morning. "Miss Catherine," he began formally, "are you really going to stay with us?" "Uncle Sam said you might, but he wasn't sure." Catherine knelt to meet the boy at eye level. "I am staying, William. If that's all right with you and your brothers and sister." William considered this gravely. "Will you marry Uncle Sam? Because James says that's the only way you can stay forever, and I told him that's not true, but he won't listen." Behind them, Samuel chuckled. "Your brother might be right this time, Will." Catherine glanced up at Samuel, who nodded encouragingly. "Yes, William," she said, turning back to the boy. "Your uncle has asked me to marry him, and I've said yes." A whoop of joy from James interrupted the moment, followed by Charlotte's excited clapping. Emma, not to be outdone, abandoned her new doll to throw herself into Catherine's arms. "You're staying forever?" the little girl asked, her eyes wide. "Forever," Catherine promised, gathering the child close. Over Emma's head, her eyes met Samuel's, and the love she saw there confirmed that she had finally found her way home. The wedding took place on New Year's Day, 1883, in the same church where they had mourned Sarah just months before. The entire community of Jordan Valley turned out, this time to celebrate. William stood proudly as Samuel's best man, while Charlotte served as flower girl, scattering dried rose petals from Sarah's garden down the aisle. James and Emma, too young for formal roles, sat in the front pew with Mrs. Wilson, who dabbed at her eyes throughout the ceremony. Catherine wore a simple white dress with Sarah's lace veil, which Samuel had discovered carefully preserved in a trunk. As she walked down the aisle toward him, she felt Sarah's presence like a gentle blessing. The grief was still there, would always be there, but now it was woven into something new and beautiful, a tapestry of loss and love, endings and beginnings. Judge Harrison, who had known both families for years, performed the ceremony. "Dearly beloved," he began, his voice carrying through the packed church, "we are gathered here today not only to unite Samuel Young and Katherine Parker in holy matrimony, but also to celebrate the formation of a family." As they spoke their vows, Samuel held Catherine's hands firmly in his voice never wavering. Catherine's words came from the deepest part of her heart, a promise not only to Samuel but to the 4 children watching with shining eyes. "By the power vested in me by the state of Oregon," Judge Harrison concluded, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." He smiled broadly. "Samuel, you may kiss your bride." The kiss was brief but tender, mindful of their young audience and the conservative community. As they turned to face the congregation, now officially a family, the church erupted in cheers and applause. The celebration afterward at the ranch was a community affair, with neighbors bringing dishes to share and musicians playing well into the evening. Catherine danced first with her new husband, then with each of the children, even little Emma, who stood on her toes. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the snow-covered valley, Catherine found a quiet moment alone with Samuel on the porch. "Happy?" he asked, his arm around her waist. "Completely," she assured him, leaning into his embrace. "Though I keep expecting to wake up and find myself back in Chicago dreaming all of this." Samuel tipped her face up to his. "Not a dream, Mrs. Young, very real and very permanent." The sound of her new name sent a thrill through Catherine. Mrs. Young, Samuel's wife, mother to Sarah's children, she had come full circle, returning to the West not as a heartbroken girl but as a woman who knew her own strength and worth. "What are you thinking?" Samuel asked, noting her thoughtful expression. "That Sarah somehow knew exactly what she was doing," Catherine replied, "bringing us together like this." Samuel's eyes grew misty. "She always was the smartest one in the family." He looked out over the ranch, his ranch, now their ranch. "I think she'd be pleased, seeing us all together." "I know she would." Katherine rested her head on his shoulder. "We'll keep her memory alive for the children. They'll always know how extraordinary their mother was." As if summoned by talk of their mother, the 4 children appeared on the porch, Charlotte carrying a small package. "We have a wedding present for you," William announced importantly. "For both of you," James clarified. Charlotte stepped forward, presenting the carefully wrapped gift to Katherine. "We all helped make it." Inside was a framed drawing, clearly done by the children's hands but with remarkable detail for their ages. It showed the ranch house with 7 figures standing before it, Samuel and Katherine in wedding clothes, the 4 children, and a 7th figure with wings and a halo hovering above them. "That's Mama watching over us," Emma explained, pointing to the angel. "William said she's our guardian angel now." Katherine felt tears spring to her eyes as Samuel's arm tightened around her. "It's beautiful," she managed. "The most precious gift I've ever received." "We'll hang it in the parlor," Samuel promised, his own voice thick with emotion, "so we can see it every day." Later that night, after the guests had departed and the children were asleep, exhausted from the day's excitement, Katherine stood by the bedroom window, looking out at the moonlit landscape. Samuel came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and pressing a kiss to her neck. "Second thoughts?" he asked lightly, though she could hear the faint trace of insecurity beneath the question. Katherine turned in his arms. "Not a single one." She touched his face gently. "I came to help for a week, but I was always meant to stay forever. It just took us both a while to realize it." "Not too long, I hope," Samuel murmured, drawing her closer. "We have all the time in the world now," Katherine assured him as his lips found hers. Spring came early to Jordan Valley in 1883. March brought wildflowers to the hillsides and new calves to the ranch. The young household had settled into comfortable rhythms, with Katherine managing the home and children's education while Samuel ran the increasingly prosperous ranch. The town was growing as well, with new businesses opening and settlers arriving regularly on the stagecoach and train. Katherine found motherhood both more challenging and more rewarding than she had imagined. Each child required something different from her. William needed guidance to balance his premature sense of responsibility with the freedom to still be a boy. James required firm boundaries for his adventurous spirit. Charlotte sought reassurance that she wasn't forgotten in the middle. And Emma simply needed love and patience as she navigated a world that sometimes confused her young mind. Samuel proved to be a partner in every sense of the word, consulting Katherine on ranch decisions, and deferring to her judgment regarding the children's upbringing. Their evenings together after the children were asleep became precious time to reconnect, share the day's events, and simply enjoy each other's company. Katherine discovered that the man she had fallen in love with as a girl had grown into someone even more worthy of her heart, strong yet gentle, confident yet humble, and deeply, unquestionably committed to his family. On a warm April afternoon, as Katherine sat on the porch mending one of James's perpetually torn shirts, Samuel returned from town earlier than expected. The unusual timing and the expression on his face immediately alerted her that something was amiss. "What is it?" she asked, setting aside her sewing as he sat beside her. "Letter from back east," he said, handing her an envelope. "For you." Katherine recognized the handwriting immediately, her former principal from Chicago. She opened the letter with steady hands, scanning the contents quickly. "They want me back," she said, looking up at Samuel. "The school board. Apparently my replacement didn't work out, and they're offering me my position again with increased salary and housing allowance." She folded the letter carefully. "They need an answer within the month." Samuel was silent, his face unreadable. Finally, he asked, "Do you want to go?" The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Katherine reached for his hand. "Samuel Young, don't you dare doubt me for even a moment." Her voice was firm but gentle. "My home is here with you and the children. Nothing could tempt me away." The tension drained from his shoulders. "I wouldn't hold you if you wanted to go," he said quietly. "Your teaching means so much to you." "It does," Katherine agreed. "And I am teaching our children and soon others as well." "The town school board asked me yesterday if I'd consider taking a few more students, children from outlying ranches who can't make it to the town school regularly." Samuel's eyebrows rose. "You didn't mention that." "I was going to discuss it with you tonight," she explained. "I think we could convert the old storage room off the kitchen into a proper classroom. It wouldn't be more than 8 or 10 children, 2 or 3 days a week." A slow smile spread across Samuel's face. "You've already got it all planned out, haven't you?" "Just the beginnings of a plan," Katherine admitted with a small laugh. "I wanted your input before deciding anything." Samuel leaned forward to kiss her softly. "Whatever makes you happy makes me happy. If you want to teach, we'll make it happen." Katherine set the letter from Chicago aside. "I'll write back tomorrow, declining their offer and suggesting several qualified teachers I know who might be interested." She nestled against Samuel's side, looking out over the ranch that had become her home. "I found something here I never had in Chicago." "And what's that?" Samuel asked, his arm around her shoulders. "Belonging," she said simply. "Purpose. Family." That summer brought more changes to the young ranch. Katherine converted the storage room into a cheerful classroom. And by July, she was teaching 12 children from neighboring ranches 3 days a week, in addition to continuing Sarah's children's education. Samuel expanded the cattle operation, hiring 2 more hands and purchasing an adjacent property when it came up for sale. The additional land included water rights that would prove invaluable in the dry years to come. In August, Katherine confirmed what she had suspected for several weeks: she was expecting a child of her own. She shared the news with Samuel on a warm evening as they sat on the porch swing after the children were asleep. "Are you certain?" he asked, his voice hushed with wonder as he placed a gentle hand on her still flat stomach. "Dr. Miller confirmed it today," she said, covering his hand with her own. "The baby should arrive in early March." Samuel pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I never thought—" He paused, overcome with emotion. "I never expected this kind of happiness, Katherine." "Nor did I," she admitted. "When I received your telegram last October, I never imagined I'd be sitting here now, your wife, mother to Sarah's children, with our own child on the way." They decided to tell the children the following Sunday after church. The reactions were varied, but universally positive. William offered solemn congratulations. James whooped with excitement at the prospect of a new playmate. Charlotte immediately began planning how to decorate the baby's room. And Emma simply climbed into Katherine's lap and patted her stomach gently. "Will the baby call you Mama?" she asked innocently. "Like I do now." Katherine and Samuel exchanged glances. Though they had never pressed the issue, Emma had gradually begun calling Katherine Mama shortly after the wedding. The older children still called her Katherine, which she respected as their choice. "Yes, sweetheart," Katherine answered, stroking Emma's hair. "The baby will call me Mama just like you do." As autumn approached, the ranch prepared for winter. Katherine preserved fruits and vegetables from their garden. Samuel ensured the barns and outbuildings were in good repair. And the children helped with age-appropriate tasks, from William assisting with the cattle to Emma sorting beans at the kitchen table. The classroom Katherine had established thrived, with parents expressing gratitude for their children's progress. On the anniversary of Sarah's death in October, The family visited her grave together. Katherine had helped the children prepare small tokens to leave. William carved a miniature horse. James created a colorful drawing. Charlotte wove a bracelet from thread, and Emma picked wildflowers. Samuel stood silently beside them, his arm around Katherine, whose pregnancy was now visible beneath her dress. "You think Mama knows about the new baby?" Charlotte asked as they walked back to the wagon. "I believe she does," Katherine answered thoughtfully. "And I think she's very happy about it." William, who had been quiet throughout the visit, finally spoke. "I remember when she got sick. She told me to take care of everyone." His voice was steady, but his eyes revealed his emotion. "I think she'd be glad you're here to help me do that, Katherine." Katherine hugged the boy, noticing for the first time that he had grown almost to her shoulder. "She would be so proud of you, William, so very proud of the young man you're becoming." December brought heavy snow and preparations for their second Christmas as a family. The house was filled with decorations, baking, and the children's excitement. Katherine, now in her 6th month of pregnancy, found herself tiring more easily but determined to make the holiday special. Samuel insisted she rest frequently, often taking over household tasks despite her protests. "You're carrying precious cargo," he reminded her when she objected to his fussing. "Let me help." Christmas Eve found them gathered in the parlor, the tree glowing with candles, stockings hung by the fireplace. As was now their tradition, Samuel read the Christmas story while the children listened attentively. Katherine watched her family, for they were truly her family now, feeling a contentment so deep it brought tears to her eyes. Later, after the children were asleep with visions of Christmas morning dancing in their heads, Samuel and Katherine sat before the fire, enjoying a rare moment of quiet. "Hard to believe it's been a year," Samuel said, his hand resting on Katherine's rounded belly. "Last Christmas Eve was the first time I told you I loved you. And now look at us," Katherine smiled, placing her hand over his as the baby kicked against their palms. "Expecting our 5th child." "5th," Samuel repeated, wonder in his voice. "Sarah's 4 and now our own." He leaned over to kiss her gently. "Thank you, Katherine, for making us a family." "We were always a family," she corrected softly. "I just found my place within it." As the fire crackled and snow fell gently outside the window, Katherine reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had come to help for a week and stayed forever, finding in Samuel and the children not just a family to care for but a home for her heart. Sarah's final gift to them all had been bringing them together, creating from tragedy something beautiful and lasting. "What are you thinking about?" Samuel asked, noting her thoughtful expression. Katherine smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "About how sometimes the hardest endings lead to the most beautiful beginnings." She guided his hand to where the baby was moving. "And how grateful I am that you sent that telegram." "Grateful that you answered it," Samuel replied, his voice tender. "Grateful that you stayed." As the clock struck midnight, ushering in Christmas Day, Katherine closed her eyes in contentment. She had traveled west to help for just 1 week. But in finding her place beside Samuel, in becoming mother to Sarah's children and now carrying their own child beneath her heart, she had found the forever she never knew she was seeking. March 15, 1884, dawned clear and cold in Jordan Valley. Katherine had been in labor since the previous evening, the ranch house alive with activity as Samuel paced anxiously in the parlor. The children were sent to stay with neighbors, and the midwife, Mrs. Henderson, directed the proceedings with calm efficiency. Just as the first rays of sunlight streamed through the bedroom window, Katherine's son was born, a robust boy with a head of dark hair and his father's determined chin. Samuel, allowed into the room moments after the birth, fell to his knees beside the bed, overcome with emotion at the sight of Katherine holding their child. "He's perfect," he whispered, touching the baby's tiny hand with a reverent finger. "Would you like to hold your son?" Katherine asked, her voice weary but joyful. As Samuel cradled the infant, Mrs. Henderson tactfully left the room to give the new parents a moment alone. Samuel looked from the baby to Katherine, his eyes filled with tears. "I never thought I would have this," he admitted. "A son of my own." "What shall we name him?" Katherine asked softly. Samuel considered the tiny face. "Thomas, after Sarah's husband, to honor them both," Katherine nodded, touched by the gesture. "Thomas Samuel Young, a good, strong name." When the children returned that afternoon, they gathered around Katherine's bed to meet their new brother. William, now 11, looked on with serious responsibility. James, 9, wanted to know when Thomas would be old enough to play. Charlotte, 7, declared him the most beautiful baby she'd ever seen. And Emma, nearly 6, climbed carefully onto the bed to place a gentle kiss on her brother's forehead. "Are you still our mama, too?" she asked Katherine anxiously. "Of course I am," Katherine assured her. "Having Thomas doesn't change how much I love each of you. My heart just grew bigger to make room for him, too." As spring turned to summer, the young ranch thrived. The cattle business was prosperous. Katherine's small school continued to serve neighboring children, and baby Thomas grew stronger each day. In July, they celebrated 1 year since Katherine had begun teaching at the ranch, marking the occasion with a picnic attended by all her students and their families. "You've changed this valley," Samuel told her that evening as they watched the sun set from the porch, Thomas sleeping in Katherine's arms. "These children would have had little education without you." "It's not just me," Katherine demurred. "It's all of us, building something here together." By Thomas's first birthday, the Jordan Valley was experiencing a period of growth and prosperity. New settlers arrived regularly, bringing with them skills and businesses the community needed. The railroad had expanded its service, making travel and shipping easier. Samuel's ranch was now one of the most successful in the region, and Katherine's small school had gained such a reputation that the town council approached her about helping to establish a proper schoolhouse in Jordan Valley itself. "They're offering to build a real school," she told Samuel excitedly after the meeting. "With desks and a bell and everything a proper school should have, and they want me to help design it and then serve as headmistress." Samuel studied her animated expression. "Is that something you'd want?" "It would mean going into town regularly." "I'd still teach our children here," she assured him. "But yes, I think I would. The valley needs a proper school, Samuel, especially with more families arriving all the time." "Then you should do it," he said simply. "The ranch is doing well enough that we could hire more help if needed." Katherine kissed him gratefully. "Thank you for understanding how important this is." "I understand how important you are," he corrected. "To me, to our children, and to this community." The Jordan Valley School opened its doors in September 1885. A simple but well-built structure with large windows to capture the natural light. Katherine divided her time between teaching her own children and Sarah's at the ranch and overseeing the new school in town, with the assistance of a young teacher fresh from normal school in Portland. That winter brought another change to the young household. A letter arrived from Boston, addressed to Samuel, from a cousin he hadn't seen in years. The cousin's daughter, Sophie, had recently graduated from a women's college and was seeking adventure in the West. Might there be a position for her at the ranch or in the nearby town? What do you think? Samuel asked Katherine after sharing the letter. "Sophie was always a bright girl, as I recall, headstrong but capable." Katherine considered. "The school could certainly use another teacher," she mused, "and having family nearby would be wonderful for the children." Sophie Young arrived in April, a tall young woman of 22 with Samuel's dark hair and determined chin, but with a spark of humor in her eyes that immediately endeared her to the children. She proved to be an excellent teacher and quickly became an integral part of both the school and the Young family. "I never expected to find such fulfillment here," Sophie confessed to Katherine one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the children play in the yard. Thomas, now 2, toddled after his older siblings with determined concentration. "When I left Boston, my friends thought I was mad." "And now," Katherine prompted. Sophie smiled. "Now I can't imagine being anywhere else. There's something about this place, this valley, this family that feels right." Katherine understood perfectly. She had felt the same way from almost the moment she'd arrived, despite her initial determination to stay only a week. Something about Jordan Valley called to certain souls, offering not just a place to live but a true home. As the years passed, the Young family continued to grow and evolve. William, at 16, began taking on significant responsibility at the ranch, showing a natural talent for business that complemented Samuel's practical knowledge of cattle and land. James, 14, discovered a passion for horses, developing a reputation as one of the finest young trainers in the region. Charlotte, 12, revealed artistic talents that Katherine nurtured with books and materials ordered from Portland. Emma, at 10, was Katherine's shadow, showing an interest in teaching that suggested she might follow in her stepmother's footsteps. And young Thomas, 5, was a curious, energetic boy who adored his father and siblings equally. In 1889, Katherine gave birth to their second child, together a daughter they named Sarah, in honor of the woman whose life and death had brought them all together. Little Sarah, with Katherine's auburn hair and Samuel's dark eyes, completed their family circle. On a warm summer evening in 1890, as Katherine sat on the porch with baby Sarah sleeping in her arms, she watched Samuel teaching Thomas to throw a lasso in the yard. The older children were nearby, William discussing cattle prices with one of the hands, James brushing down a new colt, Charlotte sketching the sunset, and Emma setting up a miniature school for her dolls. 8 years had passed since Katherine had received that telegram announcing Sarah's death. 8 years since she had come to help for a week and found instead a lifetime. The journey had not always been easy. There had been difficult winters, lean years, childhood illnesses, and the normal challenges of blending a family. But through it all, the love between Katherine and Samuel had only deepened, strengthened by shared purpose and mutual respect. Sophie, now married to the local doctor and expecting her first child, joined Katherine on the porch. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked, easing her pregnant form into a chair. Katherine smiled. "I was just thinking about how life takes unexpected turns. If someone had told me 10 years ago that I'd be sitting here, married to Samuel with 6 children and a school to my name, I would never have believed it." "The best lives are the ones we couldn't have planned," Sophie observed wisely. "At least, that's what I've learned from watching you and Samuel." As the sun set behind the hills, casting golden light across the valley they had come to love, Samuel looked up and caught Katherine's eye across the yard. His smile, warm and intimate even after all these years, still had the power to quicken her heart. He crossed to the porch, bending to kiss her and then the sleeping baby in her arms. "Happy?" he asked, just as he had on their wedding day. Katherine looked at their children, at the home they had built together, at the man who had become her partner in all things. "Completely," she answered, and it was nothing but the truth. She had come to help for a week and stayed forever, finding in this unexpected life her truest purpose and deepest joy. And as stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Katherine thought perhaps she could feel Sarah smiling down on them, her final gift to them all still unfolding in the life they had created together in Jordan Valley.